See ya.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Hi, Kelsey. Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
Hey, Aaron, did I'm trying to remember what happened yesterday afternoon. Were we supposed to meet? Did I send you an email about that?
I met with you on Monday.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought maybe we had a follow-up or something because I had a bunch of meetings yesterday and I didn't get to them, some of them. I still need your grading and feedback though. I'm almost I've gotten through just about everybody, but I still have to deal with you. So hang tight. I just got to deal with immediately, but I'll have it for you guys. I'll have it for you in the next, I don't know, couple days. Okay.
Okay.
I gave you feedback though when we met last week though, right? So at least you should have
Yeah.
how you're doing and everything, right? Okay, good. Hi everybody. Let's hang tight for a second and see who else is rolling in this morning. Okay, so I just made week 9 visible for you all. So while we're actually, maybe we should just get going. I don't know. Doesn't seem like it seems like a lot of people aren't coming this morning. Wait a minute. There's Victoria. Let's see who else. So if you guys want to look at week 9, I've just posted some content. Let me just open it up right now and say, how's everybody doing? We're kind of getting to the end zone here with the multi-track audio assignment. Anyone confronting any major challenges?
It's not really a challenge, it's just like my own problem, but I'm having a really hard time like wanting to butt in and add my opinion into it after theirs.
Uh-huh.
But I know that's like not what you're supposed to do.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, any of you guys, can any of you guys relate to that? Does anyone else have any opinions about that? Opinions about it.
Well, I definitely don't like hearing my own voice over and over as I'm editing. I don't know. I just think it's weird.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Ashley, I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting thing because to some degree, when you're asking the questions and you're talking to them, maybe there's a way to bring up the ideas or the feelings you have as questions without, debating them. Is that, I mean, you want to give an example of like how this is a struggle and like, how
Well, I was interviewing this scientist I think it was him, and I had to hold bite my tongue. It was really hard for me not to like have a back and forth. I mean, like it would be appropriate, but I was like, this is an interview, you can't do that. But also like editing, I just want to put like my 2 cents or opinion, but I know like I'm just supposed to narrate it.
Well, I'm not all that strict about that personally. Honestly, Ashley, because I think that there are certain problems with the concept of objectivity, when things are really out of whack, when there are real problems. I don't think that the reporter always has the obligation to be totally neutral. I mean, to use an extreme example, but you know, it may sound like an extreme example, but I do study history. If we were to, you know, if this was the 1930s and we were to send one of you as a reporter to Nazi Germany to just, you know, explain this new political phenomenon that was happening in Germany, would we expect the reporter to be totally neutral? Would that be the best job that the reporter could do? Or is the reporter there to kind of be a stand-in for us in some ways and to express, you know, to come from somewhere and to stand for something? And is that part of the the point of view? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Um, you know, because there was a lot of very neutral toned reporting back in the 30s, like when the Nazis were rising, you know, when New York Times reporters and Chicago Tribune reporters were reporting on Germany, the standard of the day was objectivity. But one could argue when one looks back at the way those stories were written, that they didn't do a very good job of like conveying the degree of panic or urgency that was appropriate to what was going on. You know, and it was kind of a time of panic because there was this menace, you know, that was rapidly rising in the middle of Europe. Um, but I mean, what happened with the scientist?
I don't remember exactly like what we were talking about. I can go back over my audio later, but we were talking about something and it wasn't even like I wanted to be like disagree necessarily. I just wanted to like continue it, but then I don't know. It was I cuz a lot of the people I spoke to, they're like, I don't want to put a bias on it. Like, I hope you don't, da da da. And then when they spoke, they were like very, very biased on one side or the other about the topic. So I was like,
You're are you saying didn't want to put a bias on it?
like the political people and like the scientists, like they didn't want, they were like, I just want to make sure you don't put a bias on this. Like, and then they put a bias on what they said. Or I mean, they like that's their opinion, I guess, but it was definitely bias.
Well,
So
but they didn't want you to have a bias.
yeah, they were like, I hope you don't edit this and make me sound like crazy because you disagree with me or like that type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know, then I mean, to some degree, there's an issue of bias, I suppose, in there, and in that bias can be so strong that it interferes with your understanding of you know, the story and what's true and what's not true at a fundamental level. But then there's another issue of fairness, right? Fairness and bias are different things. So you can have a point of view as a journalist, like you can feel like um, there's something called the coronavirus. It's contagious and it's dangerous, right? It's deadly. One could argue, in the context of what you're writing about, that that's a bias, because I know you've talked to people in the course of reporting this story that think that that's overblown. Um, but there's an issue of whether that's just a matter of scientific fact on a certain level, right? But even if it is, there's another issue, which is fairness, right? Which is that you talk to these different people and you fairly represent these different points of view, and you step, I mean, I think where bias or lack of bias is most important, we sort of have to ask why is it so important that you hold bias back? I mean, and what do you think it are some of the reasons why it's important to hold bias back?
I think like with every like big media or like news source, no matter like people that are more conservative are like, oh, CNN super biased, and then people that are more uh, democratic say Fox is super biased. So I think like no matter what, you're not going to win everyone over.
Well, that's because when they see, but this may just be that they don't understand what they're turning on TV and watching. Like when you turn on CNN and Chris Cuomo is on there, or Rachel Maddow or any of the others, these are opinion people. They're supposed to be going on, that's what the show is that you're tuning into. That's an opinion show. It's not a straight news show. So of course those people are biased. They're opinion talking heads, right? So I think there's a basic confusion about what kind of news people are consuming. I mean, if you want straight news, the news section of the paper would generally do that. But now there are issues with that because I think reporters feel like they're getting dragged into, when there are lies or disinformation being spread, they have to deal with it. Or when things are racist, are you unbiased about racist statements? Is that problematic? So even the straight news section is a problem. But the idea that that TV news is biased, it makes me wonder if people understand what they're tuning into when they. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I mean, all the talk shows are like I don't know what each show is called, but they're there to discuss it. So obviously, whatever they think or their opinion on it, that's what's gonna prevail in the conversation.
Right. Chris Cuomo isn't going to go on there and I mean, well, I think Chris Cuomo likes to pretend he's being more unbiased, but he clearly has an opinion. He's not going to go on there and take this neutral position for an hour, right? But then so they see that, okay, so they see CNN and Fox and all that being biased, which they are because they're opinion shows. But then what's the other reason why there's this? They want some alternative to that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, one of the Gene Ward, he gave me he went off on like a 5 or 10 minute rampage about how the profession of journalism and you should be careful because you guys you're just you're supposed to just be reporting what's true, and yet you guys put a spin on it, just this whole lecture. And I was like, oh, I'm not trying to do that, I'm just trying to do this for my class.
Well,
But
good, and that's an honest response, right?
yeah, but
have you taken Journalism 150 yet?
No.
Okay, so when we teach Journalism 150, which is Media and Society, that's more of a lecture class. And that's where we really dive deep into these ideas. And we talk about these, I'll call them professional standards, right? Like the standard of being objective, which the idea of being objective traditionally has been that you're neutral and that you're impartial and that bias is bad and that you are unbiased, right? But then there are other standards like fairness, or just accuracy. But so he feels that you put a spin on it. So one of the things that seems to raise is the issue of are you leaving enough space for the listener to make up their minds for themselves, right? So has anyone else been running into these issues? Just to kind of bring everybody else in. Kate, Carly, Aaron, Kelsey.
Sorry, I joined kind of late.
So Ashley was saying she found it with this conversation started where I said, how are you doing with your stories? And she said, well, I'm having a hard time sometimes biting my tongue.
Yeah.
And not putting in my own point of view. And I said, well, let's think about how important that is. Is it important that you keep your point of view out of all your stories?
I think it depends on what you're writing about.
Okay.
Like what the topic is.
Yeah, that's interesting. That may be true. In can you give an example maybe?
Well, maybe if you were talking about like trying to get different viewpoints from like political standpoints, like if you were talking to a far left group versus like a far right group, then you probably wouldn't want to insert your opinions, because then you might get like super, well, actually maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want to get a reaction from people
Yeah,
by
I mean,
inserting your,
yeah, I think you have a good point there. Whereas, like, are you saying maybe because you've done a lot of cultural stuff that it's
uh,
more okay to have a point of view?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I think like if you're going out like with what I don't really know how I'm trying to phrase this, but like if you were to do like a cultural story on like one group's like say like an indigenous group, you probably wouldn't want to like, you'd want to give the narrative entirely to them just because it's like their story, and you probably shouldn't say anything. I don't really know, honestly. Like I really do think that it depends on what you're talking about.
I mean,
And
I mean, I think this is a complicated subject. Carly, Aaron, Kelsey, do you guys have? I was just going to make one more comment and wrap it up, but I mean, do you guys want to weigh in with what you're thinking about or how this has come up for you so far?
I'd say that like during my interview, I was like kind of like had to keep it going, so I was saying like more of my opinions. But like that now that I'm like doing the story, I'm not really putting those into the story, but just using what they said.
Yeah, that's kind of something I was suggesting might happen with Ashley, is that she expresses point of views to push it along. But that doesn't mean, you know, you have to get into your story when you narrate it and preach, right? How about Aaron and Kelsey? Do you guys have any thoughts? Did it come up with for you all?
I try.
For me, I didn't really have that problem.
What was yours about?
I did the archival on Kobe Bryant.
Oh, okay. I see. Well, you probably have feelings about Kobe though.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
but it
that
wasn't like I had to deal with, I mean, opinions or bias or anything like.
right. And Kelsey, what were you gonna say?
I just try to not keep my opinions like in my interviews, because like mine, I did it on surfing, like longboarding with and without a leash, and the first girl I interviewed was very for wearing a leash, and then the other one was for not wearing a leash. So I obviously had my own opinion, but I tried not to bring it in and just let them talk.
Right. And what was your instinct for wanting to do that?
For not wanting to talk or like express my,
Yeah.
just because I didn't want to influence what they were gonna say.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that naturally there's a, you know, you guys can see where there's an imperative maybe, or there's an important role for the journalist to get out of the way and let the story tell itself. Like if you're going to be talking to people and getting their opinions, then you want to leave the space for that, and you fully want to air their opinions and put the different ones together so that the audience is listening, right? On the other hand, you know, when we talk about introducing facts in a story, I think there have been times in the past, okay, like for example, when you go to the newspaper, like when you go to the New York Times, you'll find there's a news section and an opinion section, okay? And so there's been this traditional division between opinion and news or facts, okay? And then also there's this kind of idea that there's this division between news and interpretation. So if I, you know, you could argue that when I interpret something, I'm putting a spin on it because I'm understanding it a certain way, right? And then there's also the idea that, you know, there's moral, there's a moral point of view. So if I take a moral position on it one way or the other, that's a point of view, and that's not objective either. So there's a distinction between facts and these questions of right and wrong, Like facts are facts, they're not, et cetera. But in the real world, what we realize is that, facts and opinions and interpretation and ethics are all very much wrapped up in each other. And I think, like, as a society, especially with everything that's happened politically, because things have been so intense for the last few years, that we're realizing those divisions aren't necessarily so neat and so clean. And so what I would just sort of suggest, I mean, I think that you guys are kind of responding to this in a smart way, is that these aren't, these can't really be totally hard and fast rules, because it wouldn't make sense if they were. Like, if you're talking to a neo-Nazi or something like that, and you're trying to do a story about it, the idea that you have to be, I mean, maybe you'll find that the best way to tell that story is to completely get out of the way and let the neo-Nazi be the neo-Nazi, right? And that the public will make up its mind for itself. But it might be, in certain cases, like if you're witness to an atrocity, if there's something like that going on, or something in our society is really going off the rails, you have to ask yourself at a certain point, is the role of the journalist to be the voice of conscience? And is that part of the job too? Yes, you're bearing witness, but is there also a role for you because you're a human being? And at the end of the day, you guys are not surveillance cameras, right? You're not automatons. So I think, if that's the case, then maybe objectivity is less about not allowing yourself to have any point of view, and more about trying to be, rigorous about, your self-awareness and what you're allowing your listeners to discover for themselves versus what you actually feel like you have to say. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So look at, I have two, like is often the case, I have two different directions in which to go here, and I'm not sure we're a small group today. I'm not sure what the best plan of attack is. So I want, since it's only the five of you guys, I want your view on what you want to focus on. So let me open up, let me share my screen and show you guys what I just posted just now right at 10:30 about, I mean, on La Lima, okay? So where was I? Let me turn this on. Wait a minute. Okay, so here's La Lima. You guys might want to pull this up for your, oh, wait a minute, whoops, I shouldn't have gone out of that. Let me go back. This is week 9. And let me go back and make sure it's visible. Is it visible to you guys yet? Let me make sure it's visible.
Yeah.
Okay. So better late than never, I hope. What I've done here is I put up the basic story structure, at least. Now, I'd had wanted to also do one about writing for an ear, and also one about this, which is basic principles of audio storytelling. So in a way, this kind of fills in stuff that we've been talking about all along, this basic principles. And then this is about story structure. So like what I'm showing in here, let me just quickly pull up the PowerPoint, is that we went over on Tuesday the alternative lead and nut graph, but I give examples of these other ones in a 20-minute video lecture. So I can go over this with you guys today and make it more interactive than obviously just me talking in a video. What I do is I play for you guys this example of a story, and I say that this is kind of an example both of this against all odds and also of the circular. And then I play you this example of an issue of contaminated water as an example of like how you can structure it with problem solution. So we can go over that today, and I can go over writing for the ear with you, or we could try to do the alternative lead and nut graph exercise again, and we can work on this approach and on trying to get you your opening paragraphs. So my question to you all is, what would you, we could do either one, but we don't have time for both. So what would you guys prefer? Kelsey, alternative lead exercise, or going over these other structures?
I'm personally good with whatever.
Okay, Aaron?
That me too, actually. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, really.
Okay, Ashley?
I'd rather do the other ones because the alternative lead and nut graph you said is posted on a video, and we went over it on Tuesday. Right?
Well, no, we went over it on Tuesday. What I do on the video is go over these other ones.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Which one do you think is more helpful?
Well, I mean, that's why I'm asking, because I have this dilemma. Here's the pros and the cons. The pros is we haven't talked about all these other structures, and it's worth listening to this, and it's worth listening to that. So if you don't think you're going to do the video and you just want to, be exposed to it now, that would be better. As you could tell from the exercise we did, though, nobody was really, homing in on the end goal of nailing like a really good alternative lead and nut graph, or alternative lead even, in the exercise. So you guys definitely could use some more practice at it. So those would be the pros and the cons. Pro for the story structure stuff, as we haven't covered it yet. Pro for the alternative lead and nut graph, is you guys definitely need some more practice at it. So what do you think, Ashley?
Maybe the alternative lead one then.
For more practice? Okay, and you would check out the video later. Carly,
Yeah.
you have a point of view?
Personally, I'd like to learn about the other ones because we haven't yet, but I'm good with whatever.
Okay, and Kate, you're going to be the deciding call.
Yeah. You asked probably the most indecisive person to make that decision.
No, there's me, so you're beat by me. I'm more indecisive, obviously.
Honestly, whichever one. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna flip a coin. Let me say this about the alternative lead and nut graph before I forget it, which is that I was listening to Antonia's. She's doing one, which is great, on the whole car meetup thing, and in it, she sort of says, "Oh, there's car meetups." She already has kind of a version of hers. How many of you guys already kind of have a version of your story already together? Any of you? Oh, you do? Okay, so is this going to be, well, do you think you would revise it, Aaron, with this new information?
I think so, possibly.
Okay. So anyways, Antonia was playing me her example of her story, and she begins by saying, hey, there are these things called car meetups, and pretty soon she's onto her first source, which is this 18-year-old girl or woman, I should say, with like a, she sounds kind of like she's slim and tiny, and she's like, and this is my car, vroom, vroom, and like you hear this huge engine, and she's like, and it's got a double intake manifold and extra exhaust and blah blah blah, and she's shouting over the roaring of this engine, right? And I said to her, this is your opening, right? Do you guys know what I mean? I mean, this would be the opening moments. This would be your grabber, right? This would be your alternative lead. And I share this story with you because I wanted to make the point that as much as we're working to craft these opening grabbers, I'll call them grabbers, or opening hooks to grab everyone's attention, one of the best pieces of advice that I got from an editor when I was struggling with one of these once was, Julian, he said, it doesn't have to be all complicated and totally worked out. You can just throw a bit of sparkle up there at the beginning of your story to grab people's attention and then lead them into it. That's really what you're trying to do. So I'm going to flip a coin, and based on that, we'll see whether we do more practice of alternative leads or whether we do the story structure. But I did want to just insert that either way as kind of another thought about alternative leads is you don't need to overthink it. I mean, yeah, you want to get good at interviewing people so that you can write them, and yeah, you want to get good at writing them, but a lot of times they can be very simple. Just, I mean, I wish Antonia was with us today, because I would have asked her to share, and you would hear just how simple it is. It's just that woman, you know, saying, yeah, this is my car, and like, you know, turning on the engine and roaring, you know, it roaring up, and you know, it would be a great opening to the story. So okay, heads is going to be alternatively to nut graph exercise. Tails, we're going to cover story structure. Okay, so we're going to cover story structure. All right, so let me share this with you. And hold on. You know what? I'm just going to open it all over again, because that would be faster. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want us to listen to it and then talk about what you guys learn in terms of story structure from it, okay? This is now the third time I've heard this morning, but okay.
Peacocks are notoriously noisy birds. So when I visited Noah's Landing, a small zoo in Coates, North Carolina, to record some peacocks and peahens, the girl birds, I figured something would happen quickly. I was wrong. And after 2 hot mid-morning hours of chasing peacocks and peahens with a microphone and nothing but some flapped wings and footsteps to show for it, I was a little miffed. I even busted out my best peacock call for nothing but a haughty glance from these fashionable birds. By now, you're probably wondering why I spent a whole morning tailing peacocks. Well, scientists are trying to learn more about why peacocks have those curious tails, because in some ways, those huge feathers make it harder for the peacocks to survive. You wouldn't try running away from a predator wearing a $500 suit. But those tails are useful for attracting peahens, just like that $500 suit may help you get a date by selling you as a classy individual. UNC biology professor Maria Servideo says this idea initially confused biologists.
Darwin was the first one to really point out, at least in the literature, that there were these traits that just seemed like they couldn't be explained by helping an individual survive. And so sexual selection is what he came up with as a reason that these traits might be there.
That process of sexual selection breaks down like this. Some animals develop flashy appearances or sounds for the sole purpose of letting others know that they are good breeding stock. When peacocks fan out their feathers, they're saying to the peahens, hey, you should mate with me because I've got a huge tail. Instead of survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most fashionable. Servideo says, though, that sexual selection is far from fully understood. We get the peahens like big peacocks, but we don't get what the peahen thinks she's getting from all those broad feathers.
If females are preferring a certain kind of male, do they get anything specific from it? Do they get direct benefits from the male, or could there be indirect benefits, like they're actually inheriting for their children?
These questions are difficult to answer for certain, but a good place to start is to find out exactly what the peahens seek out in a mate. That's where Purdue University postdoc Jessica Yorzinski, who studies peahens, comes in. During her dissertation, she was fascinated by eye tracking technology, which allows researchers to see exactly what someone is looking at.
She thought it'd be a great idea to put it on the heads of birds to see what it is that they're looking at.
That's right, peahen vision. Yorzinski and her team are the first to study mating behavior in this way. She spent months wrangling peahens.
So the strategy is to corner them in within a room of the cage, and I've gotten to the point where I can just catch them with my hands. So
attaching a helmet camera and a transmitter backpack
with Velcro and strapping on the backpack underneath their wings.
Putting the peahen in a pen with peacocks.
And we already have 2 males set up in a cage that are ready for.
And seeing what the peahen sees as the birds do their thing. Yorzinski talked me through a video of a peahen checking out a peacock.
So I'll press play now. So the female starts off from behind the male, and as she approaches, she looks at the lower portion of his train, as well as those wings that were shaking up and down. And eventually the male turns to face her, so she sees the front part of his display. She looks at a squirrel that goes by, then back to the male's display. And you can see that most of the gaze is directed on the lower portion. She looks back to where the squirrel was. It's not there anymore. Looks back to the male.
Overall, Yorzinski saw the peahens focused on the peacock's lower feathers, which she believes is because the peahens will check out the top feathers from far away and save the lower ones for a closer look. She's currently expanding her study to include how peahens looked at clipped feathers and their predators. She's even putting eye trackers on the males to figure out what they look for. Which brings us back to Noah's Landing. The peacocks were not impressed by my blue jeans, hiking boots, and microphones, but after playing a YouTube clip of a peahen's call, the boys livened right up, calling and running and puffing up their depleted feathers, which they lose outside of mating season. Even so, the resident peahen seemed uninterested and continued walking and eating bugs, demonstrating how complex the biology of a single feather can be. In Coates, I'm Daniel Lane.
Okay, so let me ask you guys, did any of you guys notice certain aspects of story structure and the way he put that together? And if so, what are they? Any thoughts?
He definitely used like the series of events that we talked about the other day, like starting it from the get-go, like not so much having it as like a general idea with a bunch of facts, but it's like he gives it in the sequence as it's happening to keep you intrigued.
Right, he's got us in scene, right? It's not the beginning of an essay. That's an excellent point. Did anyone else notice any things about the structure of it? Like the beginning and the end?
In the audio, I noticed, I mean, I don't know if this is like normal, but he would like say something and then have the lady finish the sentence. It was like,
Right.
like he would be like, oh, this, and she would continue it.
Right. So the quotes are adding flavor and punctuating in a way the story that he's telling. Right. And the quotes are all pretty short, right? Let me pull up the PowerPoint. Let me share again the screen and show you what I put up for structure here. So what I'm saying is there's, in this little video that I created for you guys on story structure, I'm proposing these 5. One is the one that we've already covered, which is alternative lead and nut graph, right? Now, as Kate pointed out, you can listen to that story and you can hear the alternative lead and nut graph, right? Would you agree with that, Kate?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. At the same time, I would argue that what about the idea that this is a story about this, maybe not against all odds, but you've got a main character at the beginning and he's confronted with a challenge, right? And he has a problem with it. Does that fit? Can you guys see that at all? Agree, disagree? What do you think? I can't see you guys on the screen anymore.
I don't really know what the problem would be in that story.
Well, think about the opening scene. What's his problem?
Was it that he couldn't get sounds originally?
Yeah, he couldn't get the peacocks to talk, right? And then that raises the question for him, right? Of like, what attracts the peacocks to the peahens? Isn't that kind of the central question that the researchers are after too? So he sets up through his, I mean, it's silly, obviously, but he sets up through his own little quest, the central story structure of the story, right? What attracts the peacocks to the peahens, or the peahens to the peacocks, as the case may be. And then he goes and he finds out by talking to the researchers, and they're questioning it, right? Which is how they end up coming up with the peacock helmet cam, right? Which is kind of funny. So it's an against all odds story in that sense. Anybody, does anyone not see that yet, or is anyone having trouble understanding it? You guys all get it? Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then I would say that just like Kate was able to point out that not only is this like an against all odds story, if I want to call it that, because it sets up that initial challenge with the guy trying to figure out, you know, in an immediate sense, how to attract the peacocks, but in the broader sense, what attracts peacocks and peahens. It's also at the same time the alternative lead in Nutcraft, right? It's also this though. It's circular. How many of you guys are just familiar with? I mean, how many movies have we seen where there's like some dramatic opening scene, and then it goes into flashback, or you know, it leaves us like at a cliffhanger moment, and then we get into the story. And then at the end of the movie, or at the end of that hour-long television show, we're back at the beginning, right? And lots of books are written this way too. Are you guys following me? You know what I mean? This idea of that you begin with the end, or you end with the beginning, which he does, right? He starts off, he's off looking for the peacocks, and then we get into the story of the scientists, and then the end of it, he brings us back to where he was at the beginning. So that's a story structure, okay? So let's listen to this one, because this is arguably a different structure, and I'm gonna call it problem solution. So like, Kate, so far, have you heard anything that, oh, not Kate, I meant Ashley, with your charter boat thing. Have you heard anything that fits with what you're doing that would be useful? Like, would you be able to use, I mean, you'd probably be able to use the alternative lead in Nutcraft, but problem solution or the circular? What do you think?
To be honest, I haven't thought about like problem solution in that industry, but I'm sure there's some that I could think of.
Right. So how do we put this? Going back to so we've got, what about against all odds with the charter boat captains?
Wait, what does the against all odds mean again?
Well, I mean, you know, it might be kind of silly in the case of the peacock thing, but he can't get the peacocks to be attracted at the beginning, right?
Mhm.
And then that raises the question of like, how is he, you know, how do these birds, how are they attracted to each other? And then when he shifts to the scientists don't have an answer to that either. But then we find out one of them has figured out, well, maybe if we attach cameras to their heads, we can see what they're looking at, right? And then he goes back to his own little against all odds situation where he hasn't been able to get them to talk to each other. And he figures out, well, if I play a YouTube recording of the peacocks, they'll all come around. So he's able to resolve that. But he sets us up with this situation where he's confronted with this issue that he can't solve. He's stuck, right? How about Kelsey or Aaron? You're doing the Kobe, right?
Yeah.
Does any of this fit with a way to tell Kobe's story so far?
I mean, I kind of did it circular, how I ended with the beginning in a way.
Yeah, his death.
Like I all circled it back to each other.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You would begin with Kobe Bryant's death, right? But then you get back to it. Is that basically right?
I didn't really talk about his death. I did it more about like his mental, like how strong he was mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began with his passion and then ended it with his passion, kind of.
So do you think you could further dramatize that by framing that as like against all odds for him?
Yeah, I could.
Right. And Kelsey, how about you? Is this giving you any ideas for yours?
I think I would probably do circular too.
And refresh our memory again. What's yours again?
The wearing a leash while longboarding.
All right. And so you would start with what would a leash board longboarding start with and end with?
I'm not quite there yet, but I can either do that one or the Against All Odds. I don't know how I want to put both the stories together yet.
Well, maybe for
But-
both you and Ashley, when we get to this next example, which is problem solution, it might make more sense. But sorry, I cut you off.
I was thinking because the one girl that I interviewed who wears a leash, who I feel like normally for longboarding, like traditional longboarding, you don't wear a leash, but she is one of the girls on tour that does. And she was the world champion in 2018 and then just won one of the contests at the wave pool, which wearing a leash was an advantage for her because you had to wear a leash in the contest. And like the other girls weren't comfortable with it. So it kind of worked in her favor and she was like kind of against all odds, I guess. But I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I mean, did that become an issue at some point in the competition or something? Did that become?
Well, you had to wear a leash the whole competition, but normally you don't have to wear a leash. But she wears a leash majority of the time.
Okay. And was there a crucial moment when that her being used to that turned out to be an advantage?
Well, yeah, she won the contest.
But, was there a moment in the contest when that, like was a leading competitor knocked out for some reason because of a problem with the leash or anything like that? Okay. Carly, how about you? I mean, any thoughts so far with the three that we've got up on the board?
So when I started, I kind of just did it in like chronological order. But this is making me think more about if I should change it up.
Yeah, so it's a good idea to play with these forms and experiment and see what's working, right? So let's listen to this one, at least the beginning, and listen to the alternative lead, okay, to begin with. But again, I'm going to call this problem solution, right? And listen to the alternative lead and listen to the use of Nat sound at this beginning and the way it helps the storytelling.
Jose Alvarez has rented his house in Colwood Acres just outside of the Raleigh city limits for 4 years. He lives here with his sister, her 3 children, and 2 small dogs. But they don't trust the well in their front yard.
We don't drink water from there. We don't cook from there. We just use it for showering, washing clothes, washing dishes, and that sort of thing.
And when he and his family brush their teeth, they do so carefully.
Don't swallow because we don't know what it may or may not do.
Since Alvarez has been living here, the Environmental Protection Agency tested the water twice. Both times it came back positive for chemical contamination.
The water comes out surprisingly clear. It doesn't have no bad taste to it.
Empty water jugs and bottles litter Alvarez's kitchen. They show how much bottled water his family goes through.
A couple of cases a week, yeah, about 8 cases a month or so.
Though Alvarez says bottled water is expensive,
it's a lot cheaper than having to go to the emergency room with stomachache.
the Alvarez family is not unique. There are dozens of homes with contaminated wells in Wake County, even though it's one of the most modern and prosperous counties in North Carolina. In a new study, UNC Public Health professor Jacqueline McDonald Gibson tested 57 wells and homes that don't have access to municipal water.
There was a high prevalence of microbial contaminants in their drinking water.
And she says those contaminants could indeed land residents in the emergency room with severe stomach issues.
In these particular communities, they have about a 25% higher risk of ending up in the emergency department for that kind of an illness.
McDonald Gibson says some of the homes with contamination are literally just a few feet outside the limits of cities such as Raleigh and Cary. She says cities should extend their water lines. But Wake County Commissioner John Burns says that's costly.
That can be a charge of some $10,000 on some of that property, which would need to be paid off with property taxes, which could cost people their homes, and we don't want to do that.
Burns recommends individual filtration systems as a more effective option. They cost less. The state helps low-income residents pay for them, and they don't force a whole neighborhood to pay for city water, where some people might not want it.
You can see the line in the yard where the well goes down.
That's the case for Ed McDougall. He lives in a neighborhood where the UNC researchers found some contaminated wells, but but he says his tested okay.
And you can hear the pump running.
McDougal has no desire to pay for city water.
I trust my well water because it's been there, been drinking it for 40 years. I've had no issues related to it.
McDougal says he tests his own water every year, but McDonald Gibson, the UNC researcher, says many people don't. So they don't know what's coming out of their faucet. In Wake County, I'm Jessa O'Connor.
Okay, Kate, tell me what your I should know this, but tell me what your topic is again for your story.
I'm doing the punk scene of the 1970s.
Oh,
Like
really?
yeah.
Are you doing? You're doing it archival?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it on CBGBs.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, in that case, I'm gonna go with Ashley and Kelsey here with this question, because I think for the 5 of you, the ones who it jumps out to me the most that problem solution for this particular story might make the most sense is for you two. Am I right? So Ashley, you're doing the charter boat one and the pandemic, right?
Yep.
So problem solution?
Problem.
Problem, I'm trying to run a business here, but there's a pandemic and lockdowns. Right.
Yeah.
And Kelsey, leash, is it safer? Is it better? Like what's the, but it's a problem. I mean, the leash is there to solve a problem, right? And it's a potential solution. Am I right?
Yeah.
So these would fit with that naturally. How about for you other two guys, Carly or Aaron? Does this fit in any kind of way for you guys with this story?
Mine?
For me, not really.
Same.
Not really. Carly?
Same. There's not much of a problem for mine, I guess.
Right. I'm sorry, I should know, but because we just talked about it, but Carly, what's yours again?
Oh, you're okay. I'm doing it on the virtual dance performance.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a problem. You don't see a problem? I mean, you don't see problem solution there?
I do. I just didn't really gear it that way.
That's
I
okay
can.
though. You don't have to go with any. I mean, I'm just trying to give you guys tools for your toolbox, right? And I think it's worth, like, can you play out a scenario where you were to structure your entire thing through problem solution with what you're doing it on? Did you see how that would work?
Yeah.
Right. So because the problem is you can't have dance class, right? And the solution is it's virtual. You could argue that. Or you could argue the problem is you're stuck doing virtual dance class and does it really work? Right?
Yeah.
What structure are you thinking for what you're doing?
I was doing chronological, but I'm thinking maybe against all odds, I might try to switch it to that.
I mean, I would say chronological is chronological, but like, I almost think when it's that you need other stuff. You at least need an alternative lead and nut graph, right? Because if it was straight up chronological, I mean, I added chronological because you never want to forget how important chronological is in terms of structuring storytelling, right? The idea that one thing comes after the other. The thing is that with news storytelling, we're dealing with people, obviously, with the way the world is now, with very short attention spans, right? And so you need to, if you were to just tell it chronologically, we wouldn't know, would we, what the story was all about for a while. So you generally have to combine chronological with something else. So do you at least have like an opening so far, Carly? Like an alternative lead?
Yeah.
Okay. So and then this other stuff can maybe just be extra scaffolding for you, right? like the circular. Could you see yourself doing it with the circular thing?
Yes.
Really? Is there what would you open with for yours?
I feel like I got a lot of variety of like different people, I guess. So really just depending on how I want to edit it and just like sticking to it.
Did any of you guys notice anything, like, just to refresh your memory, because I know you've only listened to this once and I've heard it like 10 times. There were 4 sources in the last story we heard. Can anyone remember who they are and what role they played in the story? Any memory of that? There was the first guy, right? The like guy who kind of like laughed, like, you know, that guy, Jose Alvarez, right? There was the guy at the end who was another resident who had his testing. Who were the other 2? Do you remember? So there were 4 people. There was first the Jose Alvarez. He was like a local resident. There was an expert scientist, researcher about water quality at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Then there was a policy person. There was the county commissioner. And then finally, there was another guy who is a resident who tests his own water. So all of those ended up, each source had a different role in the story. And that's my point about the sourcing there. And I just brought it up on the heels of what Carly was saying, because she was like, I have all these different people. So my question for you, Carly, I guess would be, you have all these different people, but do you have a sense yet with your structure of what role each of them could play in the story that you tell?
Sort of. I think it definitely can be better and I have to play with it more. Like it's a little bit all over the place, but we're working on it.
Yeah, so what I would maybe think about is what role each of those people plays in the story, how it adds up to a whole structure, right? And then maybe you write a nut graph that spells that out for people a little bit so they know what the story's about and what they're getting. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the nut graph would be like a paragraph that's like it's like the back of a book, right? It's like it summarizes what the story's about. So, okay. Do you guys have any questions, any comments at this point? Let's do a lightning round and you guys say your topic, your structure that you think you're going with, and how you'd open. Can we do this to put you on the spot? Like, who wants to go first? So some of you are still thinking can wait. Oh, somebody left. Who left? Well, let's see. Ashley, you want to go first? Topic, structure your thinking, and how you'd open?
Can I pass for now?
Well, just, you don't have it. Can you give us an idea? Like off the top of your head?
Maybe
But what'd you write about? Like, what'd you do it about?
my project.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about like COVID and how it's affecting the economy and people medically, and then like small businesses in the boating industry.
Okay. So you could easily do either against all odds or problem solution, right?
Mhm.
Do you have an idea of how you'd open it?
Like the introduction thing.
Yeah.
I wrote something down. I don't know if this is good. Can I read it right now or no?
Sure.
Is that what you're asking for or no?
Yeah. Well, like, how would you grab our attention?
Well, I don't know the actual script, but I guess for like problem solution, I could say something like, or the problem is like, not even the boating industry, but all small businesses are struggling to stay open with no tourists. But then the other thing is like, there's a pandemic going on.
Yeah, but you're explaining, you can do that in your nut graph. You want to start us with a moment or a person. You know how, remember when we listened to the water one that we just heard, we hear the dogs barking and the guy's like, I got all these bottles of water here. I don't want to go out to the well. So we haven't gotten this paragraph explaining, oh, there's a problem with water in Wake County, North Carolina. What we're getting is we're in somebody's living room and the guy's got all these bottles of water. He's got these dogs barking and he makes a joke about, I don't want to end up in the emergency room. And then we get you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to overthink it, but you need to bring us in somewhere to a world.
Yeah, I need to think of like a specific example or thing to like tie it in.
You know what though? And it's not so much thinking, it's listening, because you've already got stuff on audio. So you just have to go over where what you've got. And you have to say, oh, this is the best one. Because you don't have to be the voice of that. You can let them be the voice of it. But you have to find the most interesting moment. And maybe you do have to go back and get a little bit more audio from them or whatever in order to get it to work. But do you think you understand what I'm saying? You think you could do that?
Yeah, I think I just thought of something actually.
And what's that?
Some of the people I interviewed were talking about how a lot of their friends and other small business owners aren't going to be able to reopen. So maybe I can start off with that.
You could start with that. I mean, again, what you don't want to do is overthink it. You just need something interesting to grab our attention. You listen to that short audio that you did with your dad. He's pretty pissed off, and he's giving not your typical take on COVID. He's saying like, I don't think a vaccine will even work. Remember that part? Or he's like, what do you need a vaccine? It's a flu. It's like a, it's a virus. Like, you're not going to get cured with a vaccine.
Yeah. True, but
I mean, I'm not saying, don't necessarily put your dad on the spot or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? That could work, right? It's very simple, but it's going to grab our attention. We're either going to strongly agree or strongly disagree with a statement like that, and then you add in the Nat sound and you create kind of a scene where we're there with him. Maybe you do add a little bit of your own narrative script there. Like, what's your dad's name again?
Ken.
Yeah, Ken. So Ken Middleton's did you talk to him while he's on his boat when he did that?
Yeah. And I got some engine startup noises.
So, Ken Middleton is standing on his boat. Maybe you give us a little bit of like what he had just been doing on the boat before he started talking about that. And then you drop in the bite. I'm not saying use that one. I'm just coming up with one on the spur of the moment. You know what I'm saying? But, I'm sure you've got plenty of these characters and them saying salty things about the pandemic because they're pissed off about this. That'll give you plenty to work with for that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Kelsey?
Yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi got reset and I had to rejoin.
That's all right.
So I missed a little.
Okay, so I was asking, what's your topic? What are you maybe thinking right now for structure, and what's your opening? Tough, huh?
My opening, I was thinking I recorded like waves breaking and then like a leash, like undoing a leash and like waxing up a board. So maybe that. as like somewhat of an intro, or just like coordinate that within the audio.
Let me ask you this. Maybe this is a better way to get at this. You think about all the interviewing you did. How many people did you interview?
Just 2.
2?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like you need more sources?
No, they're both really good. Like I highlighted, like I already edited some, like cut it down, the audio, and there's like some really good quotes within that I like.
Okay. So when you think about the really good quotes that you like, what's the best one?
Hold on. I have it all written out in front of me. There was one that she was talking about how she'd rather like wear a leash than like look cool not wearing a leash, and it's gotten to her where she is today with being like the world champion and stuff.
Okay.
And she was like listening to herself and not caring what others thought.
Okay, maybe that's it, or maybe you hone in more on this like negative vibe about the leash. Is there like something vivid there, or something that grabs our attention right there about how surfers hate leashes?
I definitely have some quotes I could use as like opening statements.
Right. So there you go. You know what I mean? I think what you're getting at is maybe the most like one of the most interesting ways to open this, or the way that gives it the most character, is that a lot of surfers hate leashes, and she's like, I don't care. And that's kind of a surfing vibe too, right? Like, I don't care what you think. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right, Kate, how about you?
So, I'm thinking of doing, or well, I am gonna do probably either chronology. Oh my gosh, basic chronology or alternative lead and nut graph. Because I wanted to start, or like right now, I have all the clips to start it out with. There was a live performance by the Ramones at CBGB's, so I was gonna introduce it with that, and then add in a little clip of the one of the kids that was interviewed at CBGB's actually during that performance. So I've got like a bunch of I found a bunch of old interviews at CBGB's of different people going to the concerts, and then also the musicians too.
So it sounds like, yeah, I mean, because like what I was saying before is chronology itself, as I'm talking to you guys about it, is probably not enough structure.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because the problem is that we would be waiting to find out what the story is about.
Yeah.
So if you were to, so for example, where this comes into being a problem is that if you were to go on too long about that opening show at CBGB's, or if it took a while to go from there to us figuring out, oh, this is about CBGB's. First of all, you probably need like a more specific focus than just CBGB's, right?
Yeah.
But secondly, it would be better like to start off with that kid at the show, and then pretty quickly right away tell us it's about CBGB's. Now that doesn't mean you're not following chronology, because that show is the first show at CBGB's, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not, it's not like a long Shaggy Dog story about, where we're wondering what the story is about for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Carly?
I was thinking about starting with how the performer like rearranged her apartment, and then getting into like more people's transitions to virtual, and then like at the end tying it to like what they've learned, and like them like reflecting on their experiences all together.
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds like that'd work. The advantage of starting with everybody in the scene is that we'd you know, we'd be right there. It kind of bring us into the world of the virtual dance thing, right? Do you see it as either problem solution or circular or any of this other stuff?
I don't really know. Right now I have like the one specific performer, and then I go to the stage director, and then the actual like big director. So I'm not really sure.
Right. Okay. And Aaron?
Yeah, so I'm doing the Kobe Bryant and then I'm choosing circular.
Mm-hmm.
And so for my lead, I'm starting with like kind of listing all of his major like accomplishments, like all his awards and all that. And then I put in some nat sound of like an announcer as he's like going up for a shot, and then you can hear the crowd like roar in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And then I introduce like a little bit of who he is and then like what made him so great.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that you could, would it help to frame that as an against all odds type of situation?
I think it could too. I was thinking that because there's parts where I talk about like the adversity he goes through, like injuries and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about it with his upbringing? Was that a challenge at all from where he was coming from?
No, not really.
Yeah. Was he brought up fairly like comfortably?
Yeah, so his dad was in the NBA, and then when he was young, they moved to Italy so that the dad could play professionally.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
basically his whole upbringing was basketball based.
Uh-huh.
And he had like a good high school career. He was one of the top in the country. And then from high school is when he entered the draft. So he
Right.
had to like, it wasn't really against all odds for his upbringing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so maybe, you know, there isn't one that really fits perfectly for you with these.
Actually, for against all odds though, I did talk about he had a sexual assault charge, and then that kind of pushed his career too because of how he dealt with that situation.
Right.
So it could also be like problem solution too a little bit.
Yeah. So these are, you can see the way these overlap a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds like enough to kind of get going. So do you guys have any final questions, or should we wrap it up for today? Carly, Kelsey, anything?
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, guys, I might as well post this on Lolima as well. And good luck getting this stuff in, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.
Thank you.